Welcome to Finance in the Clouds. Modern finance is broken, forcing finance and accounting teams to work like it's 1985, the year Excel was invented. Here we talk about the struggles finance teams face in fast-growing companies and discuss how they can spend less time surviving and more time in the clouds. I'm your host, Jake Jones, multimedia producer and brand influencer here at Zone & Co., and I'm joined this week by Jamie Beane, Controller in Accounting and Finance at Zone & Co. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
So today we're asking the question, how have roles in finance changed since COVID-19? While the world's still kind of dealing with COVID-19 with all its different variants, we're already seeing some major impacts on business and really the world, but especially in the finance role. So Jamie, I kind of want to start off here with kind of a fun question. I say fun, right? Nothing's really fun with COVID, but I have a distinct memory of when the shutdown started. It was around spring break. I live in a college town, so kids had just left, and I was actually filming a cooking show. And we were already hearing rumblings of, you've heard of some conferences shut down. So we were kind of like, I wonder if this is going to shut down. But then out of nowhere, everybody's phone starts going off. And that's when it hit that the college had told students not to return. I think Trump had made a statement that he was shutting down the country at this point. So it was just kind of a crazy moment. Like I'm never going to forget that moment. Do you have any kind of memories of like when the shutdown happened for you?
Definitely. So for me, the shutdown was a slow progression over a week. On Monday, my kids had off for a teacher professional development day, and I took them into Boston to go to the aquarium. We had a great day. And I remember sitting at lunch, and it was kind of like a eerie feeling. A few weeks prior in Boston, there had been a conference for a pharmaceutical company, and they think it was a super spreader event. Tuesday, there was talks of food shortages, toilet paper shortages. So I went to the food store and filled up 2 carts. Wednesday, I was out for drinks with my girlfriends, and we were talking about, how is this going to impact our lives? Thursday was my kids' last day of school. And then, Friday was the 13th, the dreaded Friday the 13th. So that's kind of how it went for me.
Yeah, that's when it all really fell apart. Yeah, it's crazy. I remember too being like, oh yeah, this will probably pass in a month or two, and then here we are 2 years later. So still kind of dealing with it. But let's kind of dive into the topic at hand, and really, I just kind of want to get some top level thoughts from you, Jamie, to kick us off. How do you feel like the financial role has changed since COVID-19?
Sure. So finance teams are now working remotely from home, or, now it's 2 years later. So some are doing a hybrid schedule. Prior to COVID-19, finance teams would sit, in a corner of an office building. And if you wanted to go over and talk to a colleague, ask them a question, have a quick discussion, you could do that. But now that we're all, working from home, there's Slack and Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. That's how we communicate. And with so many professionals working from home or on a hybrid schedule, having these cloud-based software and automation tools just makes it so much easier. When COVID first started, some companies were still printing checks to pay bills, right? Now they needed to get a online bill paying solution, or companies were, still going to the bank and depositing checks. So there's a lot less paper checks, deposit slips, and bank lollipops.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of that was stuff that was happening, kind of just naturally as technology kind of slowly takes over all our lives. But it's crazy how this situation brought everyone kind of to the forefront of you've got to jump ahead with technology now. So that's a really interesting point. I want to dive into some of the things you mentioned there, Jamie, but I kind of want to start off with kind of a thing we're noticing just from research we're doing and just research studies that have been done. A lot of our research is showing that really the CFO kind of had to become CEO overnight. Financial teams had to switch gears from looking backwards at how, how did the company do this past year? How are we going to fill out our taxes, that sort of thing. And now they're having to look forward to what's to come. They're having to predict, how are we going to get cash flow? How are we going to, handle the next, several months, several years, and still turn a profit? So what was that shift like from your perspective as a, financial professional?
Managing cash flow became extremely important to pretty much every company. With supply chains disrupted, revenue streams affected, finance teams who maybe were able to pay all their bills every week now had to pick and choose which ones they could pay. Payroll's a big expense for a lot of companies. And when the federal government passed the CARES Act, many companies applied for the PPP loan. So they didn't have to lay off employees or not lay off as many employees. They used that money to cover the cost of utilities and rent. And so finance teams were involved in applying for those loans and then making sure that the funds were used in a manner that allowed their company to maximize their forgiveness.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy that all that happened and just came about. But, it's interesting to me how businesses went from, they maybe are really included in when it comes to tax time or when we are having to kind of close the year-end books. But now kind of the shift of really relying on them to know kind of how we're going to move forward to make these hard decisions. Jamie, I don't know if you've kind of experienced that pressure in your, personal experience with this, but like, what is that pressure like to suddenly have all of these hard decisions on the finance team?
In terms of pressure, yes. And I think the amount of pressure depended on several factors, right? What industry was your company in? What was your company's cash reserves like? And what type of software and automation tools did you already use? Those companies that didn't have those in place, I think were definitely at a, disadvantage.
Right.
So more pressure for them.
Exactly. Yeah. And that pressure's hard. That pressure's hard to deal with. So that's a true testament to those guys for being able to step up and do it. Would you say there's kind of been a shift in priorities? We've talked a lot about cash flow, but, along the lines of even just like risk management, cash forecasting, and management, has that kind of been a real shift for financial professionals?
Definitely. Cash has always been king,
Right.
but even more so in the post-COVID-19 world. In terms of risk management, identifying a company's risks, monitoring them, and making sure that you have mitigation strategies in place is crucial because we just don't know what's ahead.
Absolutely. It really, there really has been this shift in looking backwards, kind of a backwards way of thinking about finance to now a forward-thinking financial plan where we are having to look at all this stuff, have to think about risk management. Why do you think it is important that companies, if they're not already thinking this way, that they need to start thinking this way in a post-COVID world?
Well, I mean, it's hard to believe we've already been dealing with COVID for 2 years.
Right.
And while here in the US, the Omicron surge seems to be behind us, China is now dealing with a new lockdown because of a COVID surge. Supply chains have been disrupted. There are labor shortages. Russia's invaded Ukraine. We are living in a very unpredictable and uncertain time, and we just don't know what's next. So risk management is extremely important for all companies.
Exactly. Even beyond just, who knows what's going to happen with COVID next. But like you said, we are just in a completely unpredictable time. We've been saying for the last 2 years, these are unprecedented times, right? It's almost become a joke at how unprecedented it is. We kind of laugh when someone says that at the beginning of every meeting or whatnot. Right. So, but yes, it's definitely important to be thinking this way so you can kind of, at the very least, be as prepared as you can be for what may come down the line. We talked a little bit about technology there. The shutdown had forced a lot of companies to have to innovate really quickly. And like you said, a lot of people were starting to work from home. And so a lot of companies had to look into a remote solution. But before the shutdown, had you been able to work from home at all, Jamie, or was that a pretty easy transition for you?
I worked from home about 10 years ago. But back then, we didn't have any of these communication and remote tools that we have now, like Zoom and Slack and Microsoft Teams. So
Right.
I was very much in my own bubble, right? And it was just the cell phone.
Right.
That's how I communicated. But now here, at Zone, we use Slack a lot. We have a lot of channels, most of which are work related, but there are some fun ones. If I want to go and look at the travel channel, I can see my coworkers' recent pictures from their vacation, or I can swap recipes for my go-to weeknight meals with colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've only been with Zone for a couple months now, but coming in, learning that Zone had been remote for 8 years. That's a podcast I want to do at some point, of just kind of like tips for working from home from a company that's been doing it for quite some time. Yeah, it's been crazy how, with all these, like you're saying, all these technologies that have come out of this, Slack, Zoom, obviously some of these existed, but they've really become prevalent in this time. All of these things really do make it feel like it's an in-office type of environment. And so it's been really, really cool to see. But yeah, I was just curious about that, because I had never worked from home until the shutdown had kind of started. That was I got sent home for about 2 weeks at my job before I came to Zone, and yeah, had never really thought about what would that look like until I was kind of doing it. It's been really exciting. It's been a lot of challenges, but it's been a lot of really cool opportunities as well. So anyway, moving on, just kind of a fun question there, but working from home, it really kind of requires a lot of these systems, like we've talked about, Zoom, Slack, but also some cloud-based systems that allow everyone to collaborate while being physically apart. Google Drive, Google Docs, those kind of things have become really prevalent. But, how did moving to a cloud-based environment affect you as a financial professional? And maybe, Jamie, since you've kind of had some remote experience, if maybe just kind of what are some things you've seen that have affected how you work and how other financial professionals have worked?
Sure. So working in a cloud-based system, I feel, is so much more efficient. Being able to store all of your documents, in Google Drive, and if you need to collaborate with someone, you can just say, "Oh, just I put the document in here," and we can both look at it in real time, which is great. Share screen ability is great for my team and I, especially if I'm training someone in NetSuite, how to do something. I can share my screen, they can see it, and then they can actually go in and see that, that bill was created and posted. So it's been really great.
Share screen is awesome. I'm such a visual person that it really it makes such a difference. And it's funny, you're mentioning a lot of that stuff of just like you're working on a document while someone else is working on a document at the same time. And again, some of these tools have been around, but that's so much faster than you're working on something, you take it over to somebody, ask them to make corrections, and then kind of have to go back and forth. Whereas now that back and forth is all digital, and it's all based on what they're doing and can all happen kind of at the same time. So that's a really cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can see, like in a Google sheet, if we're both in there, it will have the little cell that the other person that you're talking to is on. It's really cool.
You can see them typing in real time and everything. It's great. So what are some of the other pros and cons of switching to a cloud-based system? I know you listed a couple pros. Is there anything else that you'd kind of throw in there? But then also, are there any cons to using these type of systems?
Sure. So cloud-based systems, easy to access, right? You can access it from anywhere. So if you're working from home most of the time, and then you go into the office for a day or two, it's seamless that way. The data is stored in one secure location. On the flip side, cons, it's also security. Data is susceptible to leakage, cyber attacks. I actually worked for a company that experienced a cyber attack on 12/31. We had outsourced our IT, and the IT company refused to pay the ransom. So while luckily for us, we only lost 1 day of data, we were down for the next 10 days.
Right.
And so it was old-fashioned Excel, Word, pen and paper. And that poor IT company,
Yeah.
they spent 2 months restoring all of their companies or all of their customers' IT systems.
Yeah.
Another con is, if your internet goes down, you're trying to, maybe read email on your phone and figure out, okay, how can I be productive when my internet's down?
Right.
So those are some cons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the security is such an important thing. I have a lot of video, right, that I'm working with, and I'm always terrified that what if this hard drive dies? What if this what if something breaks with my physical equipment? Having stuff stored on a cloud is is such a comfort to just know, like, okay, I can just re-download this. It's going to be fine. But it is interesting that there's a lot of, even though we have kind of, COVID has forced us to kind of make a lot of leaps in how we're using technology and even just technological innovations. But I do feel like we still kind of are playing catch up a little bit to what we have the infrastructure for. And obviously, here in America, we have a lot of infrastructure for internet and things like that, but we still have outages. We still have, some of those things that come. So, there's probably other parts of the world that maybe aren't quite as tuned into the internet yet. So it is kind of a balance of what are you prepared for. But Jamie, you've had a little bit more remote experience than I have, but you've also obviously worked in a real office environment. Now that you've kind of done both, which do you prefer?
I would say, oh, that's a tough question. Hi, I guess in an ideal world, maybe going into the office one day a week, right?
Right.
So you could, see some people in person, but just being able to work from home, saving that commute time, maybe you get some exercise in,
Right.
or you spend a little bit more time with your kids. But it is nice to actually see people in person. So I think in an ideal world, it would be a hybrid.
Right.
But I'm so used to, I'm so used to working from home now that, just seeing people on Zoom, I guess is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, it's definitely a push and pull there with the social aspect of working. And so, as companies look to these remote work solutions, which I do think, like you said, have a lot of benefits. For me personally, I started looking for working from home solutions because my wife and I just had our first son, and I wanted to spend more time, be more available to help with him. So, there's a lot of really good reasons for people to want to look for this type of work. But at the same time, it is important to keep in mind that those people need, the social interaction that comes from work. So as companies look for that, we would encourage you to definitely look for ways to bring in that social interaction. So,
Yeah, I will
mhm,
say here at Zone, we do happy
right.
hours at least once or twice a month. I know with my team, sometimes we'll have, little ice cream socials, or, if ice cream's not your thing and it's later, if you want to have a drink, and we just sit around and we talk and
Yeah.
socialize. And it's just over
Yeah.
Zoom.
Yeah, you can get a lot done over Zoom. It's great. So I just want to know who in your group does not like ice cream, Jamie, because I feel like we need to have a one-on-one conversation with them about why they don't like ice cream. That's a real issue, I think.
No, it's not so much that they don't like that there's no one that likes ice cream. It's just that some people don't drink alcohol.
Oh, okay. There you
So
go.
we've tried to make it, inclusive
There you go.
for
I
all.
understand.
So if your pleasure is ice cream, you go ice cream. If you like wine, you go wine. Maybe it's coffee.
I love it. I love it. I would go with all three of those. So that sounds like a fun time. But
I enjoy all three of those as well.
anyway, kind of diving back into this. So the lockdown did cause a lot of downtime for companies. Companies were forced to find ways to work as efficiently as possible. I know, obviously, we've talked a lot about with these cloud-based services that did add some efficiency, but this also, as you mentioned earlier, led to a lot of automation tools, especially for finance professionals. How has adding these automation tools, affected the finance role?
So I think it's saved a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time, which is great because then there's time that you can, use for new projects, initiatives. Some of the great tools that I think that we have here at Zone, Fast4 is a company that Zone just acquired. They have a scan and capture tool which allows you to scan a bill and then it will create an invoice in NetSuite with the information, which is amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Someone doesn't have to sit there and key it. Bank reconciliation product that helps you reconcile your transactions much faster. And then, we have zone payments here, which automates the invoice to cash process and makes collecting customer payments so much easier. So I think it's just, it saves so much time and has made some of these more manual processes easier.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, with all this downtime and needing to look forward, that, anything we can automate, anything we can make easier, definitely helps. And kind of on that vein, with businesses relying so heavily on finance teams now, does having some of these tasks be automated, does that allow teams to focus more on this risk management, this cash flow forecasting? Does that kind of give them some room to focus on those new responsibilities?
Yeah, definitely. And it allows teams, I think everybody has their list of to-dos, right? And you have your top priorities, your medium, your lows, right? And having more time allows you to get to those medium and low things on your list, which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. Awesome. And thank you for bringing in some of the stuff that Zone has to offer. There's definitely lots of cool tools that we can provide for people to help with that automation. So in some of my research that I did kind of thinking about this topic, Jamie, the Association of Accounts and Financial Professionals in Business, they conducted a survey from people in the finance industry. They took a very healthy, very diverse group of people, and they kind of asked them a list of questions. But in that research, 68% of them indicated that they were looking to improve their skills, and 75% of people said they were actively working on their job skills. How do you feel about upscaling? Do you feel like that's something important in a post-COVID world? Upskilling, I guess I should say.
Yeah, of course. I think it's always important to work on your job skills, and especially learning these new automation tools and processes. It's only going to benefit you and the company that you work for and future employers.
Absolutely. So, Jamie, as a finance professional, are there any skills that you would recommend people kind of look into improving, especially moving kind of as we're seeing this shift towards a forward financing perspective?
Sure. I would say budgeting and forecasting, given the unpredictable world that we're living in right now. I also think improved communication skills is key. With remote and hybrid work, it's really important to make sure that we're communicating efficiently and effectively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jamie, obviously COVID had a huge negative impact, right? It forced a lot of change throughout almost every industry. But I would like to think there is a silver lining to it all, or at least I'd like to try and find one. How has COVID positively impacted the reliance on finance teams, especially in terms of stature in the business?
Right. Well, finance teams have been basically forced to be more agile and, streamlined than ever. So, yeah, that's
a huge positive. They're definitely, as far as job security, right? We need these financial teams now more than ever. So that's a huge positive if you want to look at it that way. So as we come to a close here, Jamie, as a financial professional, how can we help finance teams be better set up for the future?
Sure. Meet your deadlines. Submit your timesheets on time, approve your vendor invoices timely, submit your expense reports. All of those are very important, but also work collaboratively with the finance and accounting. Make sure that we're involved in new projects and initiatives so we don't find out about it after the fact and we're not the last to know.
Sounds good. Jamie, it's been great hearing more about how COVID has impacted the finance world from you today. It's super exciting to see how the industry is adapting, and it's really exciting. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jake. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure having you. Now we want to hear from you listening at home. How has COVID impacted your place of work? let us know by emailing hello@zoneandco.com. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe to Finance in the Clouds, listen to it wherever you get your podcasts, and visit our website to see more. We'll see you next time. Bye.